Welcome to video number 3 in Module 301, Job Search Strategies. In this video, we're going to take a little bit of a look now at the application process and how employers see it. Many people think that having a credential of a CSW certificate and the affiliated certificates you've earned in this course automatically will get you an interview or a job. But it isn't really that at all. Employers see it differently. The fact that you've got a credential in their eyes helps you to have a resume. Your resume is what they look at to have an interview. And your interview has to go well for them to think of the next step, which is the reference checks. Your reference checks then mean that you would get potentially hired as a probationary or casual employee. A probationary employee is the way almost everybody starts off, meaning that for the first 3 months of your work, you're considered to be there on a trial basis. Most people don't know that this is the way the law works in BC, but it does. The first 90 days of your employment, an employer can let you go with no notice and no severance pay instantly for any reason, and they don't have to explain why. So really, they use that first 3 months to find out whether or not they want to keep you for longer than that. And by the way, they can actually extend it to 6 months if they want to. And another thing they often do is hire you to work on their casual list, sometimes called relief list, meaning that you'll work on an on-call basis. And that's often a really safe way for them to find out whether or not you're an employee that they want to have take on a more permanent and long-lasting role. And if you get past your probationary performance, that's when they'll often look at giving you an opportunity for a more regular job. So different agencies have different policies, but don't be surprised if you go into an agency that says you have to be on their casual list for a period of time, 3 months or 6 months, before you can apply for a permanent posting. Or at the very least, that they'll usually give preference to people who have done that. And even when you're in your continuing employment, remember that you'll be evaluated on a regular basis. For the first few months of your first year, you'll often be evaluated at 3 months, 6 months, and again at 1 year. And typically then you'll be evaluated at least once every year after that. And they were looking for estimations in that document that you're a proficient person and that you're often taking opportunities to learn. And that's what will give you opportunities to go up the ladder in the organization or to make lateral moves. For example, moving from one program to the other. Let's talk about where you can work. You probably already realize that you can work at community living associations such as Mission Association for Community Living, Ridge Meadows Association for Community Living, MSA Society, Home Society, Chilliwack Society, and Pathways are all examples in the local area. But you can work at community living organizations all across Canada. You can also work in public school boards as an educational assistant, not only in our area, but again, all across BC and Canada. Many people overlook private schools as employers, and because they're overlooked so often, they're often very, very hungry for qualified graduates. And community service agencies are often overlooked as well. Community service agencies such as Mission Community Services or in Abbotsford, Archway Community Services often have a very broad range of clients, including immigrants, women in transition, and seniors. And you're not going to be qualified to work in every one of their postings, but when they have postings about youth work or postings about mental health community programs, you should consider applying. And in many cases, organizations that are community oriented run other types of mental health programs, such as drop-in programs, clubhouses, shelters, and outreach. Some of them are faith-based and some of them are more secular, but again, don't overlook them. Let's say you have some personal experience or connection to other sectors, or you choose to go out and do some additional volunteer work or modular training. You might be able to branch out and be creative in looking at some other organizations. For example, many First Nations bands run their own social service programs, and they're often, again, looking for people, both educationally and in social services. And in many cases, private assisted living facilities, such as the ones we have here in Mission, are looking for people as well. You're not qualified to work in a medical facility with mental health or seniors, but in a community setting, you're highly qualified. You may also find work at community parks and recreation. We have many students who go on to work as after-school leaders or youth drop-in center people or club kids. And many people go on to work for CLBC either directly or indirectly doing respite care or home share. So you can keep your eyes on those contracts or speak to CLBC to find out what organizations they have contracted in their community to oversee those types of relationships. And another organizational type that is often overlooked are agencies that provide services to people with youth, who are youth in crisis, youth that need, for example, to live in care homes, such as Reese Family Services in our area. So don't be afraid to look at those as well. You're normally going to start off, as we said, at an entry level, meaning you'll be a casual worker or relief worker. You may also find that there's an opportunity to do a part-time job, and sometimes it's what we call a term job or a UFN, which stands for until further notice. And I strongly encourage you to take any of these types of jobs. It's quite common for people who graduate to work at more than one employer, and there are some real assets to that. First of all, you often gather experience very quickly when you do that. Second, you can create a schedule that fits your own needs by having more options. Third, once you're working for an organization, you will have first dibs at the postings that go up internally. Many people don't know this, but people who work in an organization usually get the first crack at any postings before they're publicly posted. And fourth, you'll often get a chance to find out what you like better or get a better sense of which employer works better for you in terms of where you want to settle in. Most people start off as casual, but also many people start off doing life skills work or working as apartment support workers. And you don't have to give up those jobs even when you get yourself a full-time job or a job that has many part-time hours. They're great extra work, and often people who are EAs or who have daytime hours do them in the evenings or weekends to augment and add not only experience, but a little bit more income. And remember that employers will have the most difficulty filling night shifts and evening shifts. So if you're able to do those and you tell an employer that you're eager to do them, they're going to see you as a better candidate. If you start working if you're able to do that stuff early on, then you can always transition into better hours later on. And be prepared to work some weekends when you're working in the community living sector. Again, those are busy times. It is completely okay to apply at multiple agencies and school boards, and once you're working for them, to keep your eyes on the posting board. It is very important that you're open with people when you're applying and letting them know that you have applied at more than one place. And if you're hired, it's very important to let people know that you are working in more than one place and to know their policy on that. Most of the time, agencies have learned that they have to be flexible, otherwise they will simply not be able to recruit people. And private, smaller, and rural agencies are almost always in need of staff. So if you're finding that the market is not particularly receptive to you and you're willing to be relocated or willing to go and work in a smaller organization, such as a microboard, or to work out in an area that's a little bit further from the beaten down path, you'll probably have an easier time. I have done some consulting in organizations in the remote areas of the province, and I can tell you that they often have difficulty finding people who have even a basic certificate. So you'll have a very good chance in working in those places. It's very important when you're going into an interview to be prepared. And I think that there are two ways that you might want to do this. Start by thinking, first of all, about what you really want from your job. And we're going to ask you to blog this after we're finished this video. So don't just think about money or good hours. What values do you care about? What will the character or personality be of your preferred organization? And don't just think about whether it's big or small, but what sorts of signals do you look from that organization, almost like you would if you were going to start being in a relationship with a single person. Ask questions and listen carefully to the way that they deal with you in the interview. So go in with one or two questions ready to ask. So here's what I'd like you to blog. What questions do you think you might want to ask? And how might you find out the answers to some questions about an organization other than asking your interviewer? So think about some ways that you might kind of do a little bit of research or surveillance before you ever walk in the door. Blog that and move on to video number 4.